Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for a program titled The Highest Exam, How China's Gaokao Shapes a Nation. I'm Jennifer Choo and the Director of Research and Strategy at the Center for China Analysis at Asia Study Policy Institute, where we take an inside-out approach to China analysis from anywhere from elite politics to economic development, technology breakthroughs, societal trends that have policy relevance. I'm really honored and delighted to be joined here today by two wonderful scholars, economists, longtime colleagues and authors, Hongbin Li and Ruixue Jia. Hongbin is professor of economics and the co-director of the Stanford Center on China's Economy and Institutions. And Ruixue is also professor of economics at UC San Diego and co-director of the China Data Lab. Ruixue and Hongbin, welcome. They are here to talk about their fascinating book, The Highest Exam, How the Gaokao Shapes China. And thanks, I really want to thank Ruixue today because I know you're joining us from Hong Kong and Standard Time kicked in the US and it pushed back by another hour, an hour that's already late in Hong Kong. So thank you very much. So both of you, I learned so much from your fascinating book that is both really readable, has very engaging writing, and also has many anecdotes from your own personal experiences of the Gaokao, as well as your academic and professional journey. But, it helped me to sort of piece together information that I already knew, but didn't quite piece together, which is that after the Cultural Revolution, the average adult in China had barely 4 years of education. So many could, barely read or write. But you fast forward to today, by 2021, astonishingly, the 3/5 of the young adult population, 18 to 24-year-olds, were enrolled in college. So compare that to the US, where the same demographic, the enrollment rate is about 1/3, a little over 1/3, 38% to be exact. So this is a massive rollout of the educational reform under Deng Xiaoping at the end of the 1970s. We all know that China is famous for scaling up and for its speed, and this seems to be a classic example of this. And this brought home to me how far-sighted and transformative this is. And we're going to hear more from both of you as to the achievements of this phenomenal educational transformation. But it also occurred to me that we could characterize China's educational reform as a kind of industrial policy, the state mobilizing its resources, directing talent, and shaping national priorities through education. It's also, of course, an idea deeply rooted in Chinese history, stemming from its imperial exam, where the emperor was able to select from the best of the nation who would join his bureaucracy. But to be clear, the Gaokao, the highest exam, was established in the 1950s, soon after the Cultural Revolution, and then paused during the soon after the Communist Revolution, and then paused during the Cultural Revolution, and then reinstituted in the 1970s, late 1970s. So I've asked Ruixue and Hongbin to give a brief overview of their book because the themes are very rich. There are so many details that we can't capture in just a moderated discussion. And so we'll kick off with Ruixue explaining Gaokao as how she describes it as a centralized hierarchical tournament, both its structure, logic, and historical roots. And then we'll turn to Hongbin to give us a sense of the achievements, the outcome of this highest exam, some of its inequalities as well, areas in which it could improve. With that, I want to start with Ruixue, but before I forget, I want to put into the chat information about this book and also a wonderful recap that Hongbin Center, Stanford Center on China's Economy and Institutions did on this book so that folks who are listening, who are viewing us, can get a quick overview of the entire book. So we'll take about 15 to 18 minutes for the overview by Ruixue and Hongbin, and then we'll launch into a moderated discussion thereafter. In the meantime, please feel free to put in your questions into the chat box, into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get started. So over to you, Ruixue.
Okay, thanks, Jennifer, for the generous introduction. And thanks everyone here. I wish we could meet in person. It would be much more fun. Anyway, I'll try my best in late night in Hong Kong. So this is a great opportunity to share a little bit about our new book, which is actually trying to explain how China's education system works. And we will see why we picked this title. Since you are in this webinar, I imagine all of you know about China and know that Chinese families are obsessed with education. In this age, we naturally wondered, does AI know that? The answer is yes. If you ask GPT about the top mealtime conversation, and for China, children's education and academic performance is on the top, whereas in the US, it's work, job, and sports. This is obsession with education is not only about talking and thinking, it's also about money, resources, energy spent on this. Here is just some numbers describing how much each average household spend on education. And cross-country wise, China still stand out on the top in terms of the share of spending. So what's special about Chinese education? I guess most of us would agree that China's education in its heart is exam system. And Gaokao, of course, is the peak of this exam. So that's why we picked that as a starting point and even as the title. But the book is about the exam system as an education system in general. So what's special about such a system? As we know, education is important in every society. In every society, children from richer families are more likely to go to Stanford and Harvard. It's unequal, right? So what makes China's exam-centered education system special? Why Chinese are so obsessed with this exam, especially the Gaokao? How equal or how unequal this system is? How could such a system has, as Jennifer said, has a long history. It can be at least traced back to 600 AD. Some historians even traced even further to Han Dynasty. So how could it survived so long? And how this system related to the Chinese society in general? So these are the questions motivate our research. And after for me, 15 years, for Hongbin is even longer. We think we have some answer we would like to share with you. And obviously, they're also at national level implication, right? How does education helps with China's global power, especially in this age of US-China competition? And what would happen if when the exam empire expands, meaning that Chinese immigrants to other countries, especially to the US? And we ask ourselves also, how should we educate our children and our students by if we know a lot about this system? So this motivated us to write this book. It's a kind of a little bit special book. It's not very academic. It's very readable and very short. I'm proud it's very short. And we talk about our own experiences. It's not as examples. It's not that we love ourselves so much. It's more about use this as example to show how our trajectories reflect the larger system. And we hope to provide readers a framework to understand the system. Many of you have very deep feelings about this system, know a lot of details, but think this book as a pair of glass. Once you wear it, probably you can see the system, as a whole picture. And this glass is useful to interpret other phenomena and implication, including China's global power and how Chinese system might affect or influence American education and society. So in this very short talk, I just give you a brief introduction of the framework we characterized as a centralized hierarchical tournament. I explain what these three words mean and how families, society, and state kind of behave in such a framework. So let me start with hierarchy. Of course, if you grew up in China or East Asian society, you're familiar with hierarchy. These are very hierarchical society. Historically, the hierarchy was clear. There were four classes. The gentry is on the top. If you pass the exam, you become the gentry class. Today's hierarchy is more complicated, right? It could be rural versus urban, professor versus peasants, richer people, poor people. Even education itself, if you graduate from Tsinghua, Beida, you are at the top of the education hierarchy. So as Jennifer said, on the one hand, there's huge changes of Chinese society, but on the other hand, there's something very persistent. So here is some number come from Hongbin's large-scale survey when he was working with Tsinghua, where for a few years they keep asking college graduates, fresh graduates, what their ideal job if they could do. And as you see that over the years, over 60% still prefer the state sector as their ideal job, right? This is almost like the modern 21st century definition of gentry class is working for the state sector. And I imagine if we can discuss later, if you do this survey, in recent years, it will be even more so with the economic slowing down. So that's the hierarchy part. And the tournament part, what does tournament mean? So tournament has two clear features. One is their transparent and clear rules. So the rules are very clear. The second is there's a measurable objective criteria. So in this case would be test score. And this is, this is the first lesson of tournament for Chinese, for mostly Chinese, because we didn't play sports usually, right? We learned by taking exam and learning about tournament. And being a tournament has different implications. We can discuss more in the Q&A. But I just want to I highlight one feature, which means that tournament selection is crucial. So you can think the Chinese education system is first primarily is a selection mechanism, then it's an education system, which means in this system being ranked high is more important than what you have learned, and it has different. It has strengths and problems. One problem is this selection often happened very early. Take the Gaokao as example. Like it happened when we were 18 or 19, right? And we took that exam. It largely determines our field, our university, which looms large in our life trajectory. Hongbin and I were lucky we chose economics, but we like it. But many people didn't like what they chose. So that's the tournament nature. And the third feature of the Chinese education system is this a centralized system. Obviously, this reflects the larger society, the political centralization, and the education system, especially the exam system, from very start, from the history, it was designed as a governance from the central government perspective. Of course, fast forward in nowadays, the Gaokao, which happens every year in the same time across the whole country, is clearly a tournament, is a centralized tournament. The college quota is centralized and allocated by the Ministry of Education. In the part, if the government encourage certain field, it can easily increase that quota and attract more young, talented people. And admission is centralized. And this feature is not only about the Gaokao per se, right? Even if you look at the K-12 schools, it's a centralized system. The school officials have bureaucratic ranks, which is quite special. If you are head a master of a school, you actually have a bureaucratic rank in the government. And obviously, in this system, school curricula are also centralized and carefully designed and monitored. So once you have this framework, I think you can use it to understand the behavior of families, rulers, and society. Let me start with families. So in this framework, in this kind of system, families' obsession is rational. The reason is that actually, most people would think 1 point make a difference in this hierarchy. And if I invest more in my children, he or she get 1 point, and that means a different tier of college, that means a different kind of future income and life. Is this true or not? Hongbin and I had a research paper where we look at just the students 1 point above and 1 point below the elite college cutoff. And we do find that if you're 1 point above, in principle, we are very, very similar. Jennifer is 1 point below the cutoff, but I'm lucky I get 1 point above, and I'm more likely to go to elite college. And 4 years after, when I graduate, actually also more likely to get a much better first job. So this kind of perception is also reflected in the data. So naturally, families want to invest a lot just for 1 point more. And for rulers, and I want to emphasize that the education from history till today is a very, very important governance channel. And the exam system is also a very effective governance design because it kind of offers hope and stability and loyalty to the system. It's true that, it's in the end, who could succeed in the history to become a degree holder or today to go to Tsinghua Beida, the chance is very small. But ex ante, everyone has hope to do that. And the hope is very, very important. And if you kind of failed in the system, you don't blame the system, right? You blame yourself that, or you think I'm not really working hard enough, or I'm not smart enough, right? And it's kind of, from governance perspective, it's pretty clever design. And of course, if you gain power from the system, you don't attribute it to the family, you attribute it to the system. And from national level, it's not bad. It's actually indeed recruit talents to serve the government and today to serve the country. And many institutional features, like many people complained about the regional quotas, right? Some region, like Beijing, Shanghai, gets much higher quota per capita for elite colleges. My home province, Shandong, gets much lower quota. But from state perspective, this is a design for balance of power. It's not thinking about whether Shandong people would have good life or not. It's think about politically which region is more important. So all this. Of course, by kind of centralized and designing the curricula, it also has monopoly of ideology power. So from maybe many of you think of yourself, how you participated in this system and how much you invest, but take a step back and think about you as a ruler. You might like this system. And in history, we also know what happened when this exam system was abolished, right? At least it was abolished in 1905. I had earlier paper with Yingbai from Chinese University of Hong Kong. We look at what happened afterward, and we do find in the regions that have more hope, actually produced more people joining the existing revolutionary organization, which might in the end hasten the downfall of the Qing dynasty. And when this paper was published, it was discussing foreign policy, not about China. It was talking about meritocracy is essential for America, and America also faces challenges. I think this is a general lesson for every society. Giving young people hope is very, very essential for stability. And from the societal perspective, I just want to emphasize one thing, that on the one hand, yes, education can influence the society. At the same time, education also reflects the society, mirrors the society. So we're talking about the centralized hierarchical tournament. It's not limited to education. It applies to political promotion, to academics, tenure evaluation, applies to many tournaments in business environments. And there's logic here. It's not that Chinese people enjoy being ranked. It's more like, without a transparent kind of criteria, then power can easily influence opportunity, right? Many people like a Gaokao, not that we enjoy Gaokao. It's more like the counterfactual. The alternative seems to be worse without a transparent rules, and that's what makes many Chinese families obsessed with Gaokao. And of course, this such a system also influences or affects the society, shapes values, right? As I said earlier, it kind of give a lot of respect for winners and with very limited empathy for losers, because losers, they didn't perform well enough, they are not smart enough, or they didn't work hard enough. This makes people very skeptical of a welfare state, and with Chinese inequality growing more and more serious in the decades, we have to ask ourselves how to make the society better if you keep this type of values, right? Of course, with economics slowing down, this naturally this tournament style computation naturally would lead to this evolution or Nengjuan. It's kind of a very serious, or at least has many people related to across different parts of the society. So I will stop here. Just in one sentence, if I say what is Chinese education system, I would say it's a centralized hierarchical tournament, and the exam is kind of a very effective tool to implement this tournament. And once you have this framework, then you can use it to explain different implications. And I will let Hongbin to continue the discussion.
So Ruixue have laid down the framework of the book. So we call China's education as a centralized hierarchical tournament. So I'll pick up from here to give you a few examples of how this system work and how it doesn't. So the first, Ruixue talk about this system gives people opportunities to move up or create social mobility. But social mobility doesn't mean everyone has an equal chance. So we do study the inequality of the system. Next slide, please. So there are a few things that affects inequality or equality. If you think about China's exams, every student has the chance to take the exam. But before you take the exam, the preparation is different. So it depends on like family income, where you are born, where you grow up. These are all important. China has a very important system called hukou system. So hukou system has two dimensions. When you're born, you're given a hukou. On your hukou card, it says where you can live, where you can go to school, where you can go to a hospital, where you can work, actually. So the hukou has one dimension is rural-urban. So you define agriculture or non-agriculture. You also depend which city or which province you live. So for example, Shandong or Beijing or Henan, so all different provinces. So when students take the Gaokao, every province has its own quota. So the quota is assigned by the central government. So some provinces have more quota than others relative to the population. For example, it's much easier to get into a elite college in big cities like Beijing and Shanghai, or some Western provinces like Xinjiang, Tibet. It's much harder to get into a elite college in a central province like Shandong, Henan. So these really big populous provinces with fewer elite colleges. There's also a very big rural-urban gap. As you know that China's urban areas is relatively more developed than rural areas, especially in non-coastal areas. So this gap also means the education resources are different in different locations in rural versus urban areas. This will affect how well students are prepared for the Gaokao and how high they can score in the Gaokao and where they can go to. Next slide, please. So Ruixue and I wrote a paper with a colleague, Lingsheng Meng at Stanford. We are curious how family income affect the chance of a student getting into a elite college. So we compare income from the bottom 20% to the top 20%. So as you can see, overall, getting into an elite college in China is very low. Even for the highest group, which is group 5, the chance of getting an elite college is about 4.5%. So this is about the admission rate of an elite college like Stanford and Harvard, so very low. But if you move down to the income hierarchy, for the bottom 25% income households, their children's chance of getting into elite college is 1.8%. So if you compare the two groups, the top 20% to the bottom 20% income, the ratio is about 2.5, which means the chance of getting into a elite college for the rich families is 2.5 times higher than the bottom 20% income. So this is a very large inequality. But compare China's inequality to the American inequality, actually American college admissions is even more unequal. So this is a study done by our colleagues at Harvard, Ruixue. We just set their numbers. So in the US, the top 20% income has a chance that 11 times of the bottom 20% income in getting into an elite college. So remember, China is 2.5, America is 11 times. It's much higher inequality. So this higher inequality we are going to discuss later maybe, but it's partly due to different admission systems. China is one test. In the US, you have many dimensions. You have in the college applications, you have college access, you have GPA, you have SAT. You also have a lot of extracurricular activities, which is based on income. You also in the application process, you also report your family background, which are also important in college admission. Next slide, please. That could be the source of inequality. Next, how does education at the macro level affects our country's global power? There are two things we wrote in the book. One is how education affects a country's income. So we have early studies that show that income is very important for a country's GDP. Actually, the paper we wrote a decade ago showed that education contributed to about a third of China's economic growth in the past 3 or 4 decades. The other 2/3, of course, was contributed by economic reforms and opening up, also foreign trade with America and the rest of the world. How the centralized system can help this? Because the system is centralized, the country can quickly mobilize resources, expand education. Remember, China almost had no college students in the late 70s. Today, more than half the younger generation go to college. China expand the education to the level that each year the country admit about 12 million college students. This is the largest college admission in any country around the world. The system not only can expand education, they can also decide what is important for a country's development. So in the past few decades, China decided that STEM is important. Basically, science, technology, engineer, medicine, all these fields are important. So China admit about half its students into the STEM field. Every year, China has about 5 to 6 million people in the STEM field. So Americans' number will be only about 10% of this. So every year, which means China has a lot of STEM students. That's why it can quickly expand its manufacturing sector. Also, can quickly move up in the industry hierarchy in the global supply chain. Next slide, please. Of course, this kind of system may also have some costs because what if a country made a mistake in deciding what is important in education for the country? In another chapter of the book, we talk about how when Chinese and also foreigners like from India, from Korea, when we come to the US, how the immigrants affect American education. Fundamentally, the two systems are different. China's college admission based on one test, which is very objective, transparent, measurable score. American education system college admission is based on a holistic system, which is both objective and subjective. So the immigrants from Asia, especially from China, India, so they may call for a more objective, transparent system because they are used to this system back to in their own countries. Because the difference, there are a lot of debates or controversies around the country, both from the national level and the local level. In the national level, we know there's a group of Asian people suing Harvard, and this is the reason for the abolishment of affirmative action in college admission. There are also a lot of local lawsuits, such as in San Francisco area, especially in Palo Alto, actually, school districts, citizens suing the school district for like school math placement test. There's also a paper written by economists called The White Flight, which means when Asian immigrants enter into a community, some non-Asian choose to leave the area because of the intense competition in school. They don't want to expose their kids to stress and early competition in school. Next slide, please. Finally, what's the implication of China's education system on creativity? this is an extremely important question, especially when you think about the so-called the global tech competition. So this is also a very popular hypothesis in China, especially given the advancement of AI. Some people may say that because of the AI, the advantages of China's education may completely disappear. Because if you think about China's education system emphasizes learning, knowledge, acquirement, memorization of knowledge. But in the time of AI, kids may need to be curious, need to have critical thinking, need to have social skills. But this is not the advantage of the Chinese education system. But on the other hand, we also see that China's fast advancement in manufacturing in technology. So just to give a simple conclusion, there's no good empirical economic research to really show the one way or the other of this hypothesis. So Ruixue and I collect together with two other colleagues, Professor Bai and Professor Wang. We have a recent paper on how China's Gaokao is correlated with entrepreneurship. So we link the Gaokao score to whether a person becomes an entrepreneur later. Actually, we found that it's negatively correlated, which means the higher score in the exam, the less likely you'll become an entrepreneur. But we also found that controversially that those who score higher when they start a firm, they are more likely to become more successful entrepreneurs. That firms become bigger, they are more likely to be publicly listed. Which means it's not the Gaokao that hampers the ability of it's not correlated with the ability to become entrepreneur. Rather, it could be something else in the society that means that these higher score students have a higher opportunity cost to become entrepreneur. So they may choose to not to become entrepreneur because they want to become civil servants. So they may enter the government rather than become entrepreneur. So anyway, so we didn't find any really solid evidence that the system really hampers creativity. I think we are going to stop here.
That was so fascinating. And you were able to bring up so many aspects of this book that I so enjoyed. And I know it encapsulates your decades of research and also your own experiences. So I actually want to turn to the way in which the book was structured, the way you wrote it. I actually worked at the Stanford Center on China's Economy and Institutions when you were writing this with Claire Cousineau, who wasn't able to join us today. But it's very unusual. I think, Ruixue, you touched upon this, that economists, you don't write books, but also this book doesn't have any regression tables, complicated equations, modeling, graphs and charts. And so you made a deliberate decision here to take this in a more general direction. I wanted to find out why, and then for Hongbin, what is sort of the main takeaway that you want our audience today, people outside of China, to take away from the book? So let me start with you, Ruixue.
Okay, thanks. I guess I don't know how many economists are in the audience, but if you are, you know that economists don't write books, or few people do, because we are not evaluated by books and it's not rewarded, doesn't count in any evaluation. So when there's minority of group of economists who write books, obviously I can imagine all of us has the aim to talk with the broader audience, right? And that's so when we decide to write the book, we think, we'll avoid any figure, any table, just use plain English so that we can talk with a broader readership. And Claire obviously plays a crucial role for to help us to achieve that aim. So that's indeed. It's just try to see whether we can talk with people who don't like economic typical academic books.
So maybe reach out to the students as well who's impacted by the Gaokao and the exam system. So Hongbin, how about you? Is there a main takeaway that you want our audience to get from this book?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. So definitely know like your work and our work. So as China is becoming more important in policy making in the US, in the world, at the same time, China is the least understood country among people outside China. Build a system, although I mean China is a very big country, very visible, but it's so hard to understand from outside because it's totally different system. Education is one system, but Ruixue, I believe this is the most fundamental system that shaping China. It correlates with many other systems, the political system, the economic system, the society. We are hoping to, through this book, can give people some perspective to see through the country. And we, as economists, we try to be objective. So, and only write the book based on logic and evidence.
Yeah. So I think that came through very strongly in the book, which is that looking through the prism of the highest exam, you're actually able to understand many aspects of Chinese society, economy, political governance. And that was the fascinating part of the book. Of the book, how you anchored it in the Gaokao. So let me turn to you a little bit regarding one of the hot topics among economists, also sociologists, political scientists about China today is the high rate of youth unemployment. So it's been stubbornly up near the 20%. I think right now it's at like 17%, 18%. Actually, some social scientists in China actually pegged it at over 40% during a few years ago. So, Ruixue, you convincingly told us the sticking power of Gaokao, how families devote so many resources and their children go through this kind of a mother of all exams, hellish process. So do you think, but in the US, it's the opposite, right? Sort of trust in higher education, sort of enrollment rates are dropping. What kind of gives it this living kind of legitimacy and credibility? And do you think that will have staying power over time in these times?
Yeah, this is a very good question. On the one hand, I see that why, if anything, the Gaokao become even more important. Why? This is because education in every society serves as a stratification mechanism, right? And the Gaokao is an effective stratification mechanism. And with economic slowing down, actually it's become more important. Why? Because with economic slowing down, more people would like to work for the government and for the public sector. And for public sector, it's actually more difficult to tell each individual's ability or knowledge, right? So the signal where you graduate from actually is very, very crucial for the public sector. It's generally crucial for the Chinese society, but even more so for public sector. So in such, at least in the short and medium run, because the importance of stratification, which is actually even more, salient with economic slowing down, I think people's attention to Gaokao is sustained. That said, I think the slowing down and over the decades, the inequality has been increasing more and more, with families invest a lot in the system, right? When I grew up, and I grew up in a rural village. But anyway, in that time, in general, families have very limited resources. If they wanted, even if they all wanted to invest, they didn't have a lot of resources in the system. So Gaokao as a kind of a mobility channel worked well. But over the past 20 years, it didn't work so well. So I think this is a very important challenge for both the society and the government to think about how to, it's an old system that worked in certain conditions, but actually become a burden in the new conditions. So it's important to think, how to innovate this system.
Yeah, you touched a bit both on sort of the areas of improvement for China's education system, but Hongbin, you also brought up very clearly sort of the inequality, but actually how inequality in U.S. is worse. It's even more stark, and that was very interesting. But for the sake of our audience, how would you explain maybe some of the reforms that you think China could undertake in order to flatten out its inequality? I think you already explained a bit as to why the U.S. inequality is actually higher for education. But if you could turn your attention to China, I think that'd be really interesting to hear.
Right. I think more fundamentally, the inequality is in the labor market. China has the hukou system, right? So different areas have different income level or different wages. There's an urban-rural gap, there's a regional gap. So as long as these gaps are there, like education, as Richard said, is just a way to allocate people to different locations, right? So as long as the more fundamental gap is there, education is just a tool. Of course, education itself can be reformed, like so reduce student stress level to make it more equal. Then the hierarchy should be flattened. Basically, China now has very clear hierarchy of colleges. In the US, you wouldn't agree which college is the top college, right? You may say Harvard, I may say Stanford, right? So, but in the US, it's so clear that everyone knows there's a top two, Tsinghua, Peking University, and then top 9, top 10, top 20, top 40. It's clearly defined actually. So, so if we can flatten this a little bit, then it can both save resources, reduce stress, and maybe increase efficiency. But I still think more fundamental reforms should be in the hukou system, also the labor market reforms, actually.
Can you explain a little bit more as to the reform of the hukou system and how it relates to the educational inequality? Because there is some fluidity in terms of hukou, people moving to the cities and
Right.
people moving out of the cities.
Right.
So how does it work with education?
Right. So sorry for non-Chinese audience. So hukou basically, yes, you can migrate to a city to work there, but your children cannot go to school in the local area. So that's why if you, for example, you live in Sichuan, you go to Guangdong to work, your children normally be left behind in Sichuan rural area, going to a local school. You are not allowed to go to urban school in Guangdong. So that's the issue. Also, even you can work there, you don't enjoy all the benefit locally, like medicine, pension, those kind of things, even housing. So with this system, it's very hard for people to permanent like migrate. For the education system itself, Ruixue mentioned that there's a quota system actually. If you are born in Sichuan, you have Sichuan hukou, you cannot take the Gaokao exam in Beijing or Shanghai, in any other places. You have to take in your local area. But since different area has different quota system, the degree of difficulty is different getting into elite college. So it's much easier to get into college in Beijing, Shanghai than in Sichuan and Shandong.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, Ruixue, coming back to you, you mentioned how the exam system in China is more of a selection system rather than an education system. And can you describe a little bit more? You talked about the 1 point difference, how it could make a person's, destiny going to the prestigious university versus going to a second-tier university. It makes such a big difference. But can you flesh it up for us a little bit more what that means and what your research has found?
Yeah. First, Jennifer, can you hear me clearly?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, that's great because on my side, I see my network bandwidth is low, which is probably true, literally. Yeah. Okay. Good. Yes, I think being a exam system or actually so-called meritocracy, it means actually selection is crucial. What does it mean? It's like you are ranked based on your exam performance. It's cared more about your ultimate ranking, less about what you have learned, less about what value added education gives to you. You can think education could have two functions. One is to select people, like select all these diligent and intelligent men and women. Historically, only men, now both men and women. And another important function is that once you select people, you educate them. That's real education, right? You make them learn more, and later make them earn more, right? So there are two functions of education. And being exam system, it actually means that the selection one matters a lot. Historically, there was basically no education, right? You learn yourself, you get selected. Now it seems that, you study in school, you seem to learn things together. But at least so far, all the empirical evidence suggesting the selection function is very crucial. Just use the example you gave, for instance. We find that the two students, one is one lucky one, 1 point above, the other is unlucky one, 1 point below. The idea is these two people are very, very similar in terms of ability or in terms of even family background. It's just by luck, it's 1 point above, 1 point below. By the way, the total points is 750, so 1 point doesn't make a big difference. But the fact that this one lucky guy or girl later earned much more, then you can say why, right? One thing could be he learned more, which means the value added part is like more, right? He go to better school and he actually learned more and he get paid. We find no such evidence in whatever measure one can come with. But why they still earn more is this what economists call signaling, is that the employers know that if you graduate from better school, on average they selected better people, so I would pay you more as well, because it's very difficult for employer to really know my own ability, right? So in this system, then why the degree matters so much, and especially the first degree, as you may know, Jennifer, there's this first degree discrimination in China. Like my PhD students at UCSD, they still worried that, they didn't graduate from Tsinghua and Beida. If they go back to China, they will be discriminated, even though they have pretty good, UCSD is a good, it's not Stanford, but it's pretty good, good school, but they're still worried. And this is the same logic, right? Because people still look at your first degree and thinking that, you were not, you didn't perform well, and that means you were not good enough. And that's the whole logic. I think the system, this is not necessarily bad from system perspective, from the country's perspective. Suppose you select a lot of intelligent people and who are hardworking, and that would be good for the country, as China has made all these achievements, suggests the good side. But there's this dark side, in the sense it's put too much pressure on families in terms of climbing this ladder, of in terms of being a bit higher ranked in the system, right? It's also, you wish that it's a bit more relaxed so that an average IQ person can get good education and a good life, rather than pay so much attention to select, the so-called better people based on this score. So it's it's not it's more like this tension between individuals, I think, and the aggregate outcome. And I think China is, it's more in the past, when China was much poorer, maybe this makes sense. Again, China has pretty developed, as a resources. Maybe it can think a little bit more how to improve the real education part, a bit relax on the selection part, because the system has been so good at selection. It's almost too good, so that it put all this pressure to families and the young people.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So, one of the things that, theorists have said, and we've noticed in other societies within China also, is that as the society or the country develops, becomes more economically wealthy, the population starts to individuate. There's a greater momentum towards individualization. And so you see this in sort of the rise of wellness programs in China, psychotherapy, consumers, consuming things that show their sort of, characteristics, their personality. And you just described how the Gaokao system is very hierarchical. It's rigid, and it's more like aggregate achievements or aggregate kind of accomplishments that the country can take advantage of. So do you think the Gaokao will adapt over time? Do you see this in other countries like Korea or Taiwan, Japan? And how adaptable is it, do you think?
I also saw some questions from the audience that so people just want me to compare Gaokao to SAT. Just to let you know, compared to Gaokao, SAT is like baby test. So most Chinese middle schoolers can score full score in the math test for sure. As middle schooler, like, so for sure, yeah. So Gaokao is like a 3-day test, like 7 subjects. This is long, 3 whole day test, so very long test. Uh, I think Jennifer's question is basically you asked whether China's system can reform, can change, right? Of course, it need to be reformed, need to be changed, but not fundamentally. So the test will still be there because for this country, people believe in this meritocratic system. So if society really buy in the system, you have to provide a transparent, objective test to select people into different hierarchies. So what China can do is basically what I said, you can flatten the hierarchy, right? You can maybe reduce the stress in school so that students can learn something outside their individual interest could play out a little bit, which is important both from the efficient perspective or also from human beings perspective. So this needs to be changed, but only slowly. Any major change of the system may cause some political or social issue. Just let you know. So this is very difficult to do completely changed, but it does need some small reforms actually. Yeah.
So turning to audience questions, actually, there's an important question about innovation. So based on your research, why do high-performing students still overwhelmingly go into the state sector? And also, what does this suggest in terms of China's future in innovation and also in entrepreneurship, which is very important for the tech competition, talent competition that we're in right now? For Ruixue.
Yeah. I see this is first, this, as I said, the system kind of selected all these intelligent and diligent individuals, but this system does has a problem with incentives, like what kind of people, these are these are hardworking people, but how do they spend their effort, right? So far, on the one hand, I would say on average, if you measure the entrepreneurship by, say, forms created by, say, college graduates, it's not very low. China performed pretty well. And if you look at even, I think, innovators or patents, all these typical economic measures, China has been made a lot of progress. But I feel that China could still do much better if the incentive could be kind of reformed. Currently, it's true that the talented people are still have incentive to go to the state sector, which are typically less productive than the private sector. And in day-to-day life, right, the incentive also matter, like whether you want to challenge your leader and do some creative distraction, or whether you spend your effort dining with your leader to develop the good relationship. I think these are it's not education per se. It's education reflects the society, and this society has certain incentive structure that directed the effort and the talent of people. So it could, suppose the system could be reformed and improved, China would do even better. That would be my answer.
So I was just add one point that when we talk about innovation, we always think about the big technological improvement, like creating an iPhone, EV car, or electricity, whatever. But most innovations are done by like ordinary engineers in their workshop. So like TSMC, Samsung, all those like innovative firms, right? They have like millions of patents maybe. So when you have a lot of engineers work in the factory day in, day out, they are going to have small innovations. The most important innovation China does is to reduce cost of production. So it's called process innovation, which is very important. Not creating really new product, but make the product cheaper. I think this is the reason why Chinese firms are so competitive, actually. They have so many millions of engineers. They have really, really small improvement to the production process every day. So this, I think, is important for, I think, competition in the global market.
Yeah, I think the classic example is DeepSeek. They're able to do
Right,
it.
that's different. Yeah.
Yeah.
They didn't create the first AI model, but they can do it quickly for long, right?
Right, and cheaper. So, here's a really basic question, but something that I think most people don't know. Can a student retake the Gaokao?
Yeah, they can retake it now. So they can, but remember, you can only take once a year. So if you skip one, you didn't do well, you can do it again, but take you a year. So
So there is
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead, Ruixue.
I just want to say in the data, there are 20% of people who are repeated takers. And this is another dimension of inequality. As you can imagine, it's typically, it's richer families can afford this repeated taking. And I can't help mention that historically, this is a design to give hope to everyone. You can repeat the taking anytime as you want. So the legend always like, oh, there's 3 generations, the father, grandfather, the father, and the son take the exam together.
Oh, heaven forbid.
It's by design to give you hope.
Right. I know in the imperial exam system, there are people who took it for, I don't know, decades and finally passed and all that. So I didn't realize that was still true. So in your own sort of understanding, and maybe just a quick reply to this, do you think that Chinese education system is meant to sort of, I don't know, has it been a way to catch up with the US in terms of its ability to compete economically? Or is it actually a means by which it'll be able to surpass the US through its own, through its own capabilities and strengths?
So
For both of you.
I'll do it first. So if you compare those two systems, they are very different. Each has its own advantages and disadvantages. Apparently, America has the best colleges, best graduate programs in the world, period, right? So no country can compete against the US. But I just read a New York Times article like last month about US high school graduates called their college readiness. So basically, you can like do basic math and then read the article, know the central idea. So according to that standard, so that study shows that only about 30% of American high school graduates are ready for college. We also know the graduation rate for college in the US is low, right? Because kids just are not ready for college. They don't like college. Also, it's very expensive. In China, of course, if you prepare for the Gaokao, everyone is ready for college because you study basically 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, and then 52 weeks a year. So students they study all year round. So they work really hard before taking the Gaokao, before they are 18 years old. So that's why people ask how they prepare. They prepare really hard. So they really have a good basic education level. Just to let you know. So this basic education level is important for industry revolution, for manufacturing, for services. Also through like a 12 years schooling, students are very disciplined. We don't know, we don't have any empirical evidence, but we suspect that this kind of discipline in Asian countries might be the reason why there's the industry boom in all these countries. So I'll let Rishi pick up. Yeah.
I just would first say that the system was not designed for US-China competition. It has a long history. It was designed to govern in China. That's the main purpose. That said, yes, of course, with the international relation change and with geopolitics changing, and the system is thinking, right? Also, at least the ruler of the system is thinking how to use this system in this computation. I think if it give it the structure of the system, if it gets the incentives correct, it can perform very well. As I said, it's like historically, the ruler was never thinking about science and technology. So that's, why this is all like we produce poets and these essay writers. Today, the ruler is thinking about science technology. They will produce a lot of engineers and scientists. So it's once the incentive is there, the system is very effective. At the aggregate and the national level. However, at what cost for individuals and the families? I think that's the thing I want to think, a bit more, right? For the whole society, the society needs to think a bit more. It's because this is a very costly system for families and the individuals. It's not a bad, again, I said it's not a bad, it's pretty good in terms of the national level performance, and it could be even better with the competition with the US in the background. That said, it's not necessarily a very ideal system from a welfare perspective.
Right. Well, I went to elementary school in Korea, and I have to say, when I came to this country, math was extremely easy for a long time. And so, I encourage everyone to read the book, and because we get a lot sort of also an understanding of both Ruixue and Hongbin and your academic journey. So thank you very much. It was wonderful to have you here, and look forward to talking more about your work and your research in the years to come.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.